The year is 1945. Hitler's regime has just fallen. The Allies have won the war. A bloody, destructive, 6-year war has just come to a close, with over 50 million people dead and millions more injured. Across the world, countries are in shambles, and people have been displaced from their homes. International relationships between the world's strongest and weakest powers have been shattered. Germany is one of the countries that has faced the most destruction. Many wondered how the world would recuperate. How could humanity possibly bounce back from something as terrible as this Second World War? Was there hope for post-war relations between the Allies and Axis powers? How could nations look past the conflicts and move forward? It would not be an easy process. All over the world, young people were left with a bitter taste in their mouths. The war had taken everything away from them. Thousands had lost their parents, homes, friends, and sense of security. This hardened them and created a cycle of untruth and misunderstanding. After the war had ended, stereotypes of stiff-legged, anti-Semitic Germans, of suicidal Japanese pilots, of relentless and brutal Russians, and bomb-dropping Big Brother-type Americans ran rampant throughout societies everywhere. During the war, Franklin D. Roosevelt knew that peace was essential to international relations. His common denominator for success was the need for peace in all the countries now at war. He hoped to leave behind a pattern of relationships upon which his successors could build. And it only takes one spark of an idea to ignite a flame. Dr. Rachel Anderson, a Deerfield, Michigan native, was that spark. Rachel understood the misconceptions and stereotypes that went along with being a foreigner, and had a unique desire for a change of views in the world. She was very involved in church activities during her life, and became the executive director of the Ann Arbor Washtenaw Council of Churches in Michigan shortly after World War II. As she celebrated her honeymoon in Germany and the surrounding area, Anderson was overwhelmed by the destruction she saw. She saw the lack of hope in young people's eyes and was deeply saddened. Her experiences in Europe culminated when she and her husband journeyed to Amsterdam, where the First World Conference of the World Council of Churches was being held. She witnessed Amsterdam's lights as they were turned on for the first time since the war had ended. She promised herself that she would do everything she could so that the lights would never go out again, so that war would never cause this deep of a rift in mankind's relationships ever again. For Rachel, Reconstruction was about more than just rebuilding the structures that had been demolished during the war. It was about rebuilding the foundations of humanity. It was about restoring the transatlantic relationships and turning once enemies into lifelong friends. Anderson believed that young people should get the chance to see that the world was not all misery or chaos. And then she realized that the only way to do so would be for people in both countries to open up their doors and share their homes with complete strangers. In 1951, 26,000 teenagers from Germany and Austria filled out a lengthy application to travel to the U.S. with Anderson's newly established program called Youth for Understanding, or YFU for short. That first year, only 75 German and Austrian teenagers were accepted into the program. After they traveled to the U.S. by boat, they took their first brave steps into a land they knew little about and grew up fearing. By the end of their exchange, this first group of students had learned an extreme amount of things and realized that getting to know a people and a culture firsthand was key in promoting peaceful and successful international relationships. After seeing how the first group of students' lives were positively affected by their year abroad in a country that previously was their enemy, Anderson said, "Every one of these students is a new light that has been turned on. I must do everything I can to make sure that these lights continue to burn and that new lights are turned on." From that moment on, Anderson's spark grew into a conflagration. In her 20-plus years of being the executive director at YFU, thousands upon thousands of new lights were turned on throughout the world, and still are to this day. Each and every one of the high school exchange students that has ever gone through Anderson's program has lived in a host family. This means that the students have gotten to learn about their host country from the eyes of a native family and not as an outsider. This aspect is key to YFU and is one of the reasons why Youth for Understanding has been so successful in creating global-minded students. Interacting with citizens of the host country allows for stereotypes of both the home and the host countries to be broken down. It also promotes immersive language learning, as told by Siri's favorite moment from her exchange.
I think my favorite experience was when I realized that I spoke German fluently.
YFU exchange students have a tight-knit support network and receive guidance in times of uncertainty. It's different from learning about a country or its people from a textbook because the exchange students get to experience, encounter, and explore things that could never be taught to them through a textbook or in a classroom. And these experiences will last them a lifetime. The program originally consisted of only German American and Austrian American exchanges, but rapidly grew to places all over Europe, South and Middle America, Asia, and even Africa. Since its humble beginnings in 1951, YFU has sent over 250,000 students to places all across the globe. Exchange students in the past have learned that their exchange affects more than their own lives. Host families, volunteers, area representatives, students, and teachers can and have all been affected by exchange students. This is most often described as a ripple effect. This ripple effect has proven vital in promoting international relations and the exchange of ideals and cultural understanding because it touches the lives of people indirectly involved with an exchange.
I think exchanges are still really important. I think that having friendships and establishing friendships in other parts of the world is tremendously important. You know, part of the exchange student's responsibility is really to be an ambassador for their country.
We're the people that are going to be making decisions in this world and leading this world. If we have more high schoolers experiencing the world, it's going to make a much more peaceful and unified vision of the world.
YFU exchange students also serve as key leaders of tomorrow. Some have worked for charities such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Walmart Foundation. Others have gone on to work for the United States government as foreign correspondents, diplomats, or more specifically as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State or the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Many have also helped YFU directly by becoming volunteers with the program or by hosting students in their own homes. All of this goes on to ensure that the lights never go out again. In 1988, Barry Boyd wrote an article entitled, "Does Study Abroad Make a Difference?" and said, "The expansion of high school exchange programs was driven by the good effects premise, namely that they are fundamentally beneficial, provide effective educational experiences for the participants, and further cross-cultural cooperation and understanding." This is reinforced by the findings of David J. Bachner and Ulrich Zeuchel. Conducted in 1994, their study entitled Utilizing the Effects of Youth Exchange targeted a group of Youth for Understanding exchange alumni who participated in the program from 1951 to 1987. The multitude of surveys and interviews they conducted showed that 90% of exchangees' concerns with national affairs were positively enhanced due to their exchange. 95% of alumni concluded that the abilities and skills they gained while abroad were either useful or very useful to their careers or to their lives in general. 32% of exchange alumni reported that they assisted organizations to improve international relations after their exchange experience. While these numbers only represent a small fraction of YFU's exchange students, it is undoubtedly a microcosm of all 250,000 alumni of the program. One of the main things that alumni of the program remark is that people are people.
You know, underneath it all, everyone's just a person.
Today's world would be a much more peaceful place if everyone was able to realize that we are all human. Youth for Understanding exchange students have and will continue to push towards peace on the ground, one exchange at a time. YFU has sent waves through history. Without Rachel Anderson's efforts to promote peace and international relations between Germany, Austria, and the United States in 1951, the world may have become a very different place. Immersion into another culture has promoted the development of global-minded students and peace throughout the world. The lights Rachel Anderson aspired to turn on continue to shine brightly and have radiated peace, even in what have seemed to be history's darkest of days.